Thank you, Your Honor. Can you explain to us what cash equity into a project is?
Yes. Cash equity is truly the amount of cash a borrower has to inject into a project, physically put the money into it, before the bank will start to fund the loan.
Let's go over an example. Let's assume the cost to build something is $100.
Okay.
Right. And let's assume that the cash equity into the project by the borrower is 20%.
Okay.
So how much cash does he have to put into the project?
$20.
And then 80% will be through funding from the bank.
If that's what the loan's approved for, yes.
Okay, so how much does the bank put into the project?
$80.
Now, during the project, I want you to assume that there's overruns, that there's additional costs that weren't contemplated in $100. All right? And that number comes to 25 in overruns or overcosts.
Okay.
What is the $25 up here of overruns or overcosts?
It's cost overruns on the project.
So the borrower is still required to put in his 20 here,
Yes.
and then the borrower is then required to come up with another 25 here.
Correct. That keeps the loan in balance. There's always enough money there to finish the project.
Because if this 25 falls down here, it covers, if the borrower puts in only 25, what happens to the project?
Can't be finished. It's short. At that point, it would be short $20. You wouldn't be able to finish building it. Or you'd build it, but you wouldn't be able to pay for it, and that would cause problems.
Go to the Black Book Joint Exhibit 1, page 4.
Okay.
So, just real quick on that example on the board. In order for the borrower to be in balance, he has to have $45 into the project.
Correct.
Go to page 4 of Joint Exhibit 1. Are you there, sir?
I am, yes.
Could you go to the uses side and explain what that is?
The uses side, that's the budget for the city center project. The basic categories of what the money's going to be spent on and what the dollar amounts are for each one of those categories.
How does the bank get that budget?
City center would supply it to us.
So that's numbers that City Center supplies, right?
Correct.
Okay, then on the right-hand side of the uses are percentages. Can you tell us what those percentages are?
It's the percentages that the bank will fund of those particular line items.
All right. Let's start out at the top of the uses. It says the amount 500, description land purchase. How much was the bank going to fund on this project for the land purchase?
80% of the $500,000.
So, $400,000.
Correct.
Of the $24,500 budgeted by City Center in their projections, how much was the bank willing to finance?
None of it.
With respect to the $60,959 of architect fees, how much was the bank willing to finance?
None of that.
Of the $65,923 of wetlands, how much was the bank willing to finance?
None of it.
Now, with respect to the $164,500 of excavation, how much was the bank willing to finance?
35%. I don't know, hopefully you don't do the math.
Where would the rest of the money for these expenses come from?
City Center would pay for that.
Go to the next page, please. So if we added another column,
Me, the next page?
no, I'm sorry,
Oh.
I was speaking with
Okay.
Debbie. Sorry about that. If we added another column, we know we got $500 of land purchase, right?
500,000, yes.
500,000, okay, which 80% we agreed to finance,
Correct.
20% is the borrower's responsibility.
Correct.
So the borrower needs to come up with $100,000 here.
Correct.
Next, with respect to permits and surveys, 24,500. The bank's financing zero.
Yes.
So how much is the borrower financing?
All of it.
So when those costs come in on a disbursement statement, who's responsible for paying them?
City Center is. You said financing. They weren't. The borrower wasn't financing it. The borrower was putting in cash to cover those expenses.
Okay. Now with the $60,959, how much was the bank willing to put in cash to pay for the architect fees?
None of the loan was going to be used to pay for that.
How much was City Center required to put in when the fees for architects came in?
The full $60,959.
Next, wetland mitigation, $65,923. How much was the bank willing to pay that?
Nothing from the loan.
The borrower?
100%.
Okay. And then the borrowers will pay 65% of the excavation work?
Correct.
That totals roughly $358,307.
Correct. And just probably rounding errors in there, but correct.
So maybe the 20 and 65%,
May have been 20.2 or 65.4, but yeah, it just doesn't go out that far.
so the borrower's required equity funds at time of closing is roughly $358,000.
Correct.
Let's go to the next page. Debbie. That number we just went is roughly $359,000. Is that under the sources side of Exhibit 1? Is that where that figure's derived from?
Yes.
Okay. So at the time of closing, how much money was City Center required to put in as cash equity?
At the time of closing, $360,358.
Next, how much cash was required in total for all the buildings?
For the construction of the buildings, $840,000.
And for each building, City Center would be required to put in how much?
$210,000 when they started the building.
And then finally, the rest of the money would come from City Center at $8.2 million.
Come from the bank.
Or, I'm sorry, from the bank, $8.2 million.
Correct.
All right. And if we look back on page 4 of Exhibit 1, that's exactly what we have there, right?
Yes.
If you could turn to City Center Exhibit 2B, page 23, which is the white book. And I have this up on the screen if you guys don't want to switch back and forth in books. City Center Exhibit 2B, page 23. Mr. Kelleher, can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what that is?
That is a city center application for payment, application number 2.
Does it show the previous payments that were made from the closing of October 24th, 2005?
It does.
Okay. And at the closing on October 24th, 2005, how much was paid for land?
Land is $95,000.
Permits?
$4,042.
Survey?
$18,000.
Architect site work?
$41,000.
Architect building?
$19,959.
Wetlands?
$11,923.
We know from the previous slide, from item 2 permits all the way down to the wetlands, who was responsible for paying 100% of those fees?
City Center was.
And then with respect to the land, City Center was responsible for up to $100,000.
Correct.
So if you add all these together, how much was City Center responsible for paying as cash equity into this project at the time of closing on October 24th, 2010?
Of those line items,
If you total all these up,
I'm going to guess it's the $189,924.
you heard the testimony a couple days ago when Mr. Beach asked Mr. Speck about how they came up with $611,000 on the closing statement of October 24th, 2005, when the amount of work completed was more than that.
Yes.
Are you able to explain how we came up with this, or how the bank came up with $611,000?
Oh, yes.
Okay, let's go to the next slide. In Joint Exhibit 10 is the first if you could just, the witness, go to Joint Exhibit 10. The black book, sir. Okay. Go to the second page. Does it state on there at the time of closing what the total completed and stored work amount was?
Total completed and stored work as of October 26th, $971,764.
So that's the amount that when the inspector went out there on the day before, the 2 days before closing, he determined this is the amount of work, the total work that's been completed and stored.
Correct.
Okay, now we need to go back to the uses and sources to figure out who's responsible for paying that, right?
Correct.
Because some of it may be for permits, some of it may be for wetlands.
Correct.
So let's go to the next slide, please. I'll say slide, that way we don't get confused with page. If you remember, we went over the $189,924 was the amount on Exhibit 2B that City Center was responsible for paying for at the time of the first closing.
Yes.
Okay, so this is the amount of work that's completed.
Yep.
Okay, and within that work, there's $189,924 of work that City Center is responsible for paying for, right?
Right. Contractually, per the loan documents, City Center was to pay those dollars.
And explain to ladies and gentlemen of the jury how that could be done at the first closing.
At the first closing, this project started before the bank actually closed the loan. Those dollars could have been paid by City Center before we ever got there, before the closing ever happened. If they weren't, City Center could have come to the closing with a check, given the title company a check. The title company would turn around and disperse the money out. Or if there were monies owed to City Center from the closing, they were entitled to some of the money per the contractor statement. It could have been netted against it. Say, City Center was owed $200,000 from the closing that would be paid to them, and they had to put in $189,000. They wouldn't put in $189,000 and take out $200,000. They just net it and take the $11,000 walk away. sense.
All right, so if you subtract that number, it comes to 781.84. Now go to Joint Exhibit 26.
Still in the
In the black book, I'm sorry, Joint Exhibit 26. And I have this on the screen so you guys don't have to flip that.
Okay.
Do you see on Joint Exhibit 26 that number 781,400 or
Yes.
okay, where does that show up?
That is line 110.
Okay, flip to the next slide, please. So that number shows up on line 110,
Yes.
which is, that's the total amount of work completed. That's the amount that draw one, which the parties agreed that Fifth Third would not fund. So City Center comes in with roughly 189.
Correct.
It totals that amount, which is the exact amount in the note on line 110.
Correct.
Okay. Then, why is another $170,434 taken off?
For the bank to open the loan, to actually get into the transaction, City Center was to have, that was a few slides back, $360,000 in cash equity into the deal. Right now, they've only got $189,000 in. They have to make up the difference to the 360s. 189 plus the 170 is going to give you that $360,000 in cash that City Center has to have into the project before we start funding the loan.
Explain the ways the title company could have done this $170,434 cash equity injection.
At that closing, similar to what I just said, City Center would write a check, go to the closing, give the title company the check. The title company then would collect all the money, the bank's piece of the money, City Center's piece of the money, and disperse those funds to all the subcontractors and vendors that needed to get paid. If one of those subcontractors or vendors was City Center, they could net those fees against us. Instead of City Center bringing in a check and then getting a check back, they could just say, forget about it, give me the dollars off the top that would truly come to me after I put in my equity.
So after you take out the $360,000 which is required by the agreement of the parties, that leaves $611,406. Does that show up anywhere on the settlement statement of October 24th, 2005?
Line 109, draw 1 to City Center Complex, $611,406. Yes, that's what the bank was contractually obligated to pay at that point in time with the second draw, I believe.
Let's go to the next slide, please. So we have line 111 on the closing statement, that's 170.
Correct.
And then we have the funds that City Center is required to bring in to pay the vendors that the bank agreed, or the bank stated that it was their responsibility, correct?
Right. It was agreed to ahead of time that City Center would pay those vendors.
And if you total those two numbers, what does it total?
$360,358.
Okay, now go back to Exhibit 1, page 4. How much was City Center required to pay in?
Initial cash equity, $360,358.
So as of October 24th, 2005, at the time of the first closing, City Center had in its initial equity requirement.
Correct. They had the $360,000 needed, injected into the dirt for Fifth Third Bank to close the loan.
Now, if you could, go to the white, or the red book, Exhibit 44N.
$44N, yes.
N as in Nancy.
N as in Nancy.
Is that the email that Brian Speck sent just days before closing to City Center?
Brian Speck sent it to Rich Plank. Looks like it was sent to the title company too on Saturday, October 22nd.
And the numbers that we just went over with are the same numbers that are in that email.
Correct.
Now, City Center still responsible for putting in I think it's $210,000 per building?
Yes.
Pursuant to the loan agreement, when were they required to put that in?
It was when they started construction on a building. We didn't make them put that $840,000 in day one. We let them stagger it when they built the buildings.
So, go to Exhibit 45, Mr. Callagher only.
Red book?
Red book.
Okay.
Does Mr. Speck send an email out on December 23rd, 2005 regarding the second draw?
Yes.
And do you know why he sent out that draw, or that email?
It's to Mary at Hawk LLC. Doing my best to explain this. Let me know if you have any questions. Looks like he's trying to clarify what happened after the fact with the second draw.
And as part of that email, is there a amount that City Center is required to pay in order to fund the second draw?
Yes.
And what is that amount?
There are,
Let's start
it's
with
like three amounts.
let's start with the 210,000.
Yeah, 210,000.
Okay, so that was the equity that City Center is required to pay in pursuant to the loan agreement to start building number one.
Correct.
And how could that have been done? Straight ahead. When they started the building, why was that required?
Per the contract and the loan agreement, as soon as you start construction on a building, City Center had to put in their $210,000 to start the building, and the bank would fund the balance to complete it.
So when the bank took that $210,000 off of the draw request, the second draw request, whose responsibility was it to bring the $210,000 into closing?
City Center.
Pursuant to the agreement.
Pursuant to the agreement, yes.
Okay. And explain to us again how that could have been accomplished at the title company.
Again, same thing. City Center could have written a check and brought it to the title company and let the title company disperse the money. Or if City Center was owed money back from this draw and it was more than the $210,000, they could have netted it against each other. Instead of trading checks, City Center would just take a smaller check away.
Now the next amount up is, it says, less increases in sworn. You see that?
Yes.
$62,502.67?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell us what an increase in sworn means?
An increase in the sworn, it's a cost overrun on the project. It's at $25.
Is that $25 up there?
Yeah.
Okay. It has nothing to do with the $20 required pursuant to the loan agreement.
No. The $210,000 would be in the place of the 20. The 63 is a cost overrun. The project now costs more money than when we started. we've got to have the funds available or we won't be able to finish the project. There's not enough money to finish it. City Center has to put in that additional money.
Next is, it says less closing costs, $36,273. You see that?
Yes.
Can you explain to us why the bank isn't funding that?
We're funding based on the budget we received from City Center, and from this I would say the initial closing costs were $36,000 more than what the budget says. Again, cost overrun, the budget's gone up, City Center has to cover the increase in the costs.
Okay. So what number up there is the $36,000 number?
It's up to 25, it's cost overrun.
If you could turn to Joint Exhibit 4 in the black book, which is the loan agreement. Is that too far away to see? You guys have better eyes than me. Thank you.
4? Sorry, 4?
Yes, 4 in the black binder.
Got it.
Now, what does it mean to have lending provisions?
Lending provisions, construction loan agreement, it's the nuts and bolts, the rules, the roadmap for how we're going to finish the project.
And do each one of the items under lending provisions are required to be in place throughout the loan?
Yes.
I want to specifically concentrate for a minute on the lending provision E, which deals with leases.
Okay.
It says, what type of leases are permitted under the loan agreement?
Office leases and retail leases.
And those office leases and retail leases are defined later on page 8.
Yes.
So, in order to determine what type of leases are permissible to meet the percentage requirements, you have to look at the definitions in the loan agreement.
Correct.
Okay. One is an office lease, which means the office. Read that to us and tell you, strike that. These two types of leases are defined in the loan agreement, right?
Yes, they are.
Do either one of these definitions permit residential leases?
No, they do not.
Why not?
Why not?
Yes.
Because we're building a retail and office building.
And is there a reason from the bank's perspective that they did not want residential leases in there?
One, yes, we didn't know anything about residential. We were building a retail and office building. Two, it would have greatly increased the cost of the project, which we didn't have enough money in the loan to cover and pay for. It would have been very large cost overruns. Three, residential leases, typically, they renew every year. Office and retail leases are for 5, 10 years at a time, so there's a much higher turnover in the building. The dollars you can get from an office and retail lease are significantly more than you can get from an apartment lease. So adding an apartment would actually cause the value of the project to go down. So yeah, no, we don't want residential in there.
Now, was there a requirement of how much of a building had to be leased before it was started?
Yes.
And what percentage was that?
50% of the building had to be pre-leased before we could start construction.
With what type of leases?
Office and retail leases.
Now, could they be all office or all retail leases?
No. It says leases shall include at least 50% of the leased portion of the building, and as party to the 50% leasing, at least 25% for office.
Why did the bank want a portion of the pre-leasing to be office?
We were concerned the office space would be more difficult to lease than the retail space. On Broadway, retail seemed to be leasing fairly easy. Office, we weren't as confident would be an easy thing to lease, so we wanted to make sure a portion of that office space was pre-leased before we started to fund and build the building.
Let's go over, and this is just for the witness, go to the White Book, City Center Exhibit 19. Okay. That's the Anytime Fitness lease?
Lease to Grasty's Accor.
Well,
Yeah, it looks like it's the Anytime Fitness lease.
okay. And that lease was entered into on what date?
This is dated December 20th, 2005.
Was it Anytime?
Anytime Fitness.
Okay. And how many square feet was going to be leased by Anytime Fitness?
Looks like 4,995.
Go to Exhibit 27 in the City Center lease.
$27. Got it.
Okay. That's a lease with who?
Todd and Rayanne Pasca.
Okay. Is that the Z-Grill lease?
Yeah, I think that was the Z-Grill owners.
Okay. What's the date of that
Z-Grill,
lease?
yes. That lease is May 1st, 2006.
How much lease space were they going to take?
3,300 square feet.
Go to City Center Exhibit 22.
Got it.
What lease is that?
Cold Stone Creamery.
And what is the date of that lease?
notarized March 2nd, 2006.
And how many square feet is the Cold Stone Creamery?
1,511.
I'm going to check my math. I believe it totals 9,806 square feet.
Yes.
Now going to Exhibit 38. No, straight. Let's go up and let's analyze. The Anytime Fitness lease, is that an office lease or a retail lease?
That's retail.
Okay, based on the clear definition of the loan agreement?
Correct.
Okay, so let's put an R next to that. Z Girl, is that a retail or office lease?
It's a retail lease.
The Cold Stone Creamery, or as Brian Speck wrote up in the Blue Memo, the Stone Cold Creamery lease.
Still retail.
All right. Let's go back and look at our definition. What do we need? We need 50%, right?
We need 50% of the building pre-leased, and of that, at least 25% office.
Are any of those leases office?
No.
Do they meet the requirements of the lending provisions?
No.
Go to a City Center White Book Exhibit 38. When you get there, go to basement page 1320.
Okay.
Does it have on that exhibit what the total rentable square feet in building 2 is?
The net rentable area in building 2, 18,953 square feet.
And pursuant to our loan documents, have to have 50% pre-leased, right?
Correct.
So we take 1/2 of that number, which is what?
9,470, 465, 4. Somebody took the calculator away.
Someone stole our calculator. So, these leases are all dated at the end of 2005, 2006, right?
Yeah, I just noticed they're dated after the building was already under construction.
Yeah. They met the 50% requirement if these leases would have been prepared, signed, and dated as of October 24th, 2005. Is that true?
Yes, we needed those leases in place before the building started.
But even with those leases in place, meeting the 50% requirement under the loan documents, they still don't meet the office space requirement.
Correct. We have no office space leased in this building yet, so we have not met the requirement to start construction of the first building.
And the bank was concerned with the office rental space because that was the hardest space to rent.
Right, that was the riskier piece of this project.
And we wanted to make sure part of that risk was taken out before they started construction.
Right. We wanted at least 25% pre-leased, so the whole thing wasn't speculative.
you could go to the blue memo, which is in the black book, Exhibit 2, and the jury, you don't need to go there unless you want. Go to page 8 of the blue memo. You see Richard Plank's personal financial statement there?
I do, yes.
Go to the line item that says 2 liquor licenses. You see that?
2 liquor licenses, $400,000.
And if I divide that by 2, if my math is correct, that's $200,000 a liquor license.
$200,000 a piece, yes.
You reviewed all the loan documents in this case?
I did.
Okay. Were you able to find a provision in the loan documents that required Fifth Third to give City Center notice of default?
No, I was not.
Do you remember in your deposition being asked that question by Mr. Beach about whether or not a borrower should get notice of default?
I do, yes.
Okay. And generally, can you explain to us what your memory is as to how you answer those questions?
I think I said something along the lines of, yeah, we probably should have given them some notice of default.
In this particular case, did the bank give City Center notice of default?
Oh, yeah, there's email after phone call showing that we've got defaults, we've got cost overruns, we have equity requirements, we're missing leases, we're missing financial information. Was there a letter sent that said, this is your default? No, there was not.
And was that required by the loan agreement?
No, after reviewing the loan documents, it was not.
And then once the bank internally declares that they're no longer going to work with the borrower, what happens to that credit facility at the bank?
What happens to the relationship? Or?
Yeah, that's a bad question. What happens to the loan? Do they accelerate it?
Oh yeah. Once we make the determination that the borrower is not working with us, we can't get the problems resolved, yes, we issue demand and accelerate the loan.
So at that point, once the covenants can't be rectified or fixed by the borrower, the bank accelerates the loan, and in this case, November, sent out a letter stating the full amounts due.
Correct.
At this point, is the bank owed money?
Yes. As of the second draw? Or as of?
As of today.
As of today? Yes, the bank is owed money.
Did you, as a bank representative, have someone in your direction get on the bank system in order to determine the amount of money that's owed to Fifth Third Bank from City Center?
I did, yes.
And is that amount as of April 2nd, 2013?
Yes, it is.
Go to the slide 10. As of April 2nd, 2013, what is the principal amount owed to Fifth Third Bank?
$2,602,362.39.
Now, was there a auction in this case of the City Center complex?
Yes. Yes, the entire complex went to auction and was sold.
Did the court appoint a receiver over the property in this case?
Yes.
Explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury how that occurred.
At some point in the process, the bank determined that we could not get the cooperation from City Center. We could not get the information we needed to determine where we were at in the project, how we were going to get ourselves out of this. Buildings kept being built, money kept being spent, but no one had to pay for it. We couldn't control the situation anymore. And we asked the court to appoint a receiver. Receiver is somebody who steps in and manages the project. They only answer to the court. They have to listen to the court, have to do what the court says. So we now have a third party responsible in there to run the project.
Did ultimately that receiver sell City Center Complex at auction?
Yes. Yes, they did.
And what did the receiver do with the proceeds from the auction?
Proceeds from the auction were deposited with the court.
And then I'm going to show you what's been marked as Plans Exhibit 105. Have you had a chance to review Plans Exhibit 105?
Yes.
What is the date of that document? Well, strike that. What is that document?
This is an order granting motion for ruling on uncontested priority and release of proceeds from the receiver's account.
And is it signed by the Honorable Judge Parrish?
It is.
Did the court make a determination in that order in April 2012 that the proceeds that the receiver received from the sale of the property should go to Fifth Third Bank?
Yes.
And did those proceeds go to Fifth Third Bank?
Yes, they did.
Okay. At this time, I move to introduce into evidence Exhibit 105.
We just renew our previous objections, Your Honor.
Which objection was that?
Should we approach?
Yes.